Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into two of the most powerful and, let's be honest, complex forces that shape our world, race and ethnicity. They're woven so tightly into our history and our daily headlines that if we want to really understand our society, we have to get our heads around them first.
So let's start with a moment. On a February night back in 2012, a neighborhood watch coordinator, George Zimmerman, calls 911. He's reporting what he calls a suspicious person. That person was Trayvon Martin, an unarmed 17-year-old black kid just walking home. And on that call, Zimmerman says this. The 911 dispatcher actually told him not to follow Martin, but he did anyway. A confrontation happened, and in the end, the teenager was shot and killed.
Trayvon Martin's death, as you can imagine, set off a national outcry, and it raised this huge, urgent question. Because a moment like this, it doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's the end result of all these powerful social forces bubbling under the surface. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the ideas, the histories, and the structures that can lead to such a tragedy.
Okay, so to even begin to answer that question, we all need to be on the same page. We've got to build a kind of sociological toolkit together so we can see the invisible structures at play. And the very first tool we need to grab is the one that helps us understand the biggest concept of all. Race.
Now, if you take one thing away from this, let it be the phrase social construction. What that really means is that race isn't some biological fact written into our DNA. Nope, it's an idea that's written into our society. It's a set of categories that we, as humans, invented based on how people look. And then we gave those categories an enormous amount of power and meaning.
It's also super easy to get race and ethnicity mixed up, but the difference is really important. So as you can see here, race is all about those perceived physical traits, what we see. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is about shared culture, things like a common ancestry, a language, or a set of traditions. You know, think about it this way. Someone whose family is from Ireland and someone whose family is from Italy might both be racially categorized as white, but they belong to two completely different ethnic groups.
All right, the next tool in our kit helps us redefine a word we hear all the time, minority group. For sociologists, this term has pretty much nothing to do with numbers. It has everything to do with power.
And this, right here, is the key. A group can actually be the numerical majority in a country, but still be considered a minority group simply because they lack power. The classic example of this is apartheid-era South Africa. The black population was vastly larger than the white population, but they were systematically oppressed by a small, ruling group that held all the political and economic cards.
So, we've got our key concepts down: race, ethnicity, and what a minority group really is. But how do these ideas actually turn into real-world harm? Let's take a look under the hood at the mechanics of how inequality gets built and kept in place.
This is basically the roadmap, from a simple thought to a harmful action. It usually kicks off with stereotypes, those lazy, oversimplified, and often totally false generalizations we make about people. If you let those go unchecked, they can harden into prejudice, a really hostile attitude toward an entire group. And then, when that prejudice is put into action, that's when it becomes discrimination. Actions that deny people opportunities and cause very real harm.
This is so important to understand because racism isn't just one simple thing. It works on a bunch of different levels. Sure, it can be the individual racism between two people, but it can also be systemic, literally built into the rules of our banks, our schools, our companies. It can even be cultural, shaping what our society thinks is beautiful or what success looks like. Just seeing all its different forms is the first step to being able to challenge.
Now, to understand the other side of the coin from discrimination, sociologist Peggy McIntosh came up with this really powerful metaphor. She talks about privilege as being this invisible knapsack. It's full of unearned advantages, special provisions that you didn't ask for, but that make your journey through life a little bit easier. It's like having a set of keys and maps that others don't, often without you even realizing you're carrying them.
So we can see the problem, but the big question is, why does it even exist? To explain the deep-rooted causes of racial inequality, sociologists look at the problem through a few different theoretical lenses. And each lens, as you'll see, brings a totally different part of the issue into focus.
Let's try on these three lenses. First up, functionalism. It asks a kind of strange question. What function could racism possibly serve for the dominant group? And the conclusion is that it helps justify an unequal system, making it seem stable or even natural. The second lens, conflict theory, sees society as a constant battle for power and resources. From this perspective, racism is a tool used by a ruling class to keep people divided and hold on to their power. And finally, there's interactionism. This one zooms way in, from the big picture to our daily lives. It argues that it's the symbols of race, like skin color, that lead to racism as we interact with each other, reinforcing these hierarchies day by day.
So those theories help us get at the why. Now let's look at the what, the actual outcomes we see in the world. When different groups live together in a society, their relationships can land pretty much anywhere on a really wide spectrum. And this spectrum can get pretty dark. It ranges from true tolerance all the way to absolute hatred. On the best end, you've got pluralism. Think of it like a salad bowl, where all cultures exist together and are equally valued. A little further down, there's assimilation, where a minority group feels pressure to adopt the culture of the dominant one. Then comes segregation, the physical and social separation of groups. Even more hostile is expulsion, which is literally forcing a group out. And at the absolute worst, most intolerant end, you have genocide, the deliberate attempt to wipe out an entire group of people. Okay, so after exploring the problem and how it all works, we're left with the most important question of all. What's the solution? So this final part of our explainer is about moving from just understanding the problem to taking action by exploring this really powerful idea, anti-racism. So thinkers like Ibram X. Kendi argue that just being not racist isn't really enough because that's a passive thing. Anti-racism, as you see here, is the total opposite. It's an active, ongoing verb. It's a conscious choice to constantly re-examine ourselves and our society and to actively work to challenge and take apart racism wherever we find it.
And the practice of anti-racism actually points in two directions at once. First, it looks inward. It asks us to recognize and own the biased ideas that, let's face it, we've all soaked up from living in our society. But at the exact same time, it looks outward. It demands that we identify the racist policies that are baked into our institutions and actively work to tear them down and replace them with fair and equitable ones.
And that really brings us to the final, crucial takeaway. Being racist or anti-racist isn't some fixed label. It's not a judgment about whether you're a good or a bad person deep down. It's simply a reflection of what you do. It's about our actions, our choices, and the policies we either support or challenge. And that really leaves every one of us with a fundamental question to ask ourselves: what are my actions doing?